Hi, AndyQuest here. This is my recap for the anime Loner Life in Another World. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. The story begins with a boy secretly watching a group of goblins gathered around a campfire. But just as he shifts his foot, a twig snaps, alerting the goblins to his presence. Without hesitation, he bolts, but also the goblins hot on his ass. As he runs, a sly smile creeps across his face because this is all part of his plan. The goblins then obliviously soon tumble into a pitfall trap he cleverly set up earlier. The boy finally reveals his face, breathing a sigh of relief, thinking it was a close call. He's thankful for his foresight in preparing the trap and reflects on the fact that for now, he's surviving in this world all on his own. The story then flashes back to the day when he was transported to another world. We find our protagonist Haruka during a school lunch break, reading manga alone as usual. He admits that he's a loner but by choice. He prefers his own company, convinced that others would only disrupt his reading. Haruka describes how his classmates have split into various cliques. The gals, the delinquents, the group around the class rep, the jocks, and the nerds. Everyone else he lumps into the others category. He makes it clear that he doesn't fit into any of these groups, and he's fine with that. With that thought, he tries to take a nap. But suddenly, the classroom begins glowing and everyone is stunned. Haruka, however, quickly spots a magic circle forming on the floor, and far from panicking, he gets excited at the idea of being teleported to another world. But that excitement quickly fades as he realizes it's going to be a pain in the ass. Deciding to avoid the whole situation, he makes a break for the door in an attempt to escape the circle. But predictably, the classroom doors won't budge. Unwilling to give up, Haruka frantically throws anything he can at the door in hopes of breaking it, but to no avail. In a final effort, he climbs up into the ceiling, thinking he's finally outsmarted the magic circle. He takes a deep breath, feeling safe at last, but that relief is short-lived. Another magic circle appears above him, and before he knows it, he's whisked away to the cliched white void. Haruka finds himself standing in an empty space, waiting for the usual appearance of a king, princess, or god. But instead of any grand figure, he notices an old man, sitting there looking just as lonely as him. The old-timer god then rushes toward Haruka, clearly panicked. As he mumbles, Haruka pieces together that this flustered old man is the god of another world. The god explains that Haruka's classmates have already been transported to this new world, and he's shocked to realize he missed one of them. Haruka bursts out laughing, mocking the god for not even noticing him hiding in the ceiling hatch. The god, embarrassed and clearly frustrated, hurriedly tells Haruka to pick a skill so he can transport him too. Haruka is then presented with a massive list of skills, only to realize that all the cheat skills have been snatched up by his classmates. He sighs in annoyance as he sifts through the remaining scraps. One skill, Dice, catches his eye. It allows him to add a point to any stat if he rolls 2 6s. He chuckles at the absurdity, but moves on to check the combat skills. Of course, only Cane Mastery is left, a skill he deems utterly pathetic. He moves on to the starting gear and is greeted with the pitiful sight of skills called Villager, Set, and some contact lenses. Sighing again, he takes a look at the magical spells, only to see mundane options like temperature control, packing, weight management, and movement spells. His skill choices are no better, general health and walking. As for job titles, his options are just as bleak, shut-in, and meat. Finally, his list of traits includes corporate proactiveness, the utterly useless master of none, and a ridiculous blockhead trait that feels like an insult tailored just for him. Frustrated beyond belief, Haruka grabs the god and shakes him violently, yelling that he won't even make it past the starting village with this pathetic lineup. He berates the god, demanding he do his job properly and offer a better variety of skills and abilities. Flustered and desperate to get rid of the stubborn loner, the god finally relents, granting Haruka all the remaining skills and shoving him into the new world. The scene then shifts, and we find Haruka alone in a forest. Before him lies the sad-looking villager Set. He sighs once more and rummages through the accompanying bag and is surprised to discover that it has an unlimited storage capacity. Inside, he finds some basic gear, a wooden stick, contact lenses, and the rest of the leftover junk. Resigned to his fate, he dons the gear, trying to get into the whole otherworld vibe, and then he decides to check his stats. But as Haruka attempts to open his stats window, a pop-up appears asking him to use his dice skill. Curious, he rolls the dice and gets M on both of them. Confused, he ponders what M could mean. Unable to figure it out at first, he's prompted to choose which stat to apply the points to. Knowing raw stats won't guarantee survival in this world, he decides to dump everything into his luck. When the stats window finally opens, he's shocked to see that his luck stat has maxed out, so it dawns on him that the M stands for max. Feeling a glimmer of hope, he checks out the rest of his stats, and unsurprisingly, he sees all the worthless skills he'd acquired. Amidst them, he discovers 2 additional skills. One is Loner, which ensures he can only live alone and prevents him from ever forming a party. The other is Servitude, a skill that lets him command others, albeit ironically since no one would want to follow a loner. Haruka then frustratedly grumbles that his chances of getting a harem in this world just went up in smoke thanks to these garbage skills. Then as he ponders the absence of his classmates, he realizes it doesn't matter since he can't form a party anyway. So with that shit situation, he decides to move on, focusing on setting up a base of operations instead. As he explores the dense forest, Haruka grumbles about the poor visibility due to the overwhelming number of trees. Then he remembers the contact lenses he stashed in his bag. He puts them on, and immediately, his vision sharpens, revealing the names of all the plants and objects around him. It turns out his contact lenses grant him the appraisal skill, and suddenly the entire world feels more accessible. Excited by this newfound power, Haruka stumbles upon some edible mushrooms with the added benefit of drawing out latent abilities. He gleefully stuffs them into his bag, knowing his magical bag can hold an unlimited amount of items. Feeling more confident, Haruka realizes that with this skill, he can locate anything he needs. Then shortly after, he finds a river, fills his water bottle, and quenches his thirst. He then stumbles upon a cave and stops at the entrance, praying that no monsters are lurking inside. After a moment, he heads in. To his relief, it's pretty spacious and comfortable. He figures living here might actually be a good idea, especially since he's got tents and lanterns. He grabs the dry leaves and twigs he picked up earlier and uses his temperature control magic to start a fire. He hopes this will keep the beasts away. Before crashing for the night, he checks his stats. Turns out his temperature magic has leveled up, unlocking fire magic. He's also picked up new skills like clairvoyant sight, presence detection, and enemy tracking. He figures it's probably because he's been on edge, watching for monsters. As he drifts off, he can't help but wonder what he'll do if anything shows up. He knocks out, and when he wakes up the next day, he's relieved to find no issues. He figures it's thanks to his monster-repelling items and the fact that his shut-in job title seems to protect his space. Feeling hungry, he starts a fire with his freshly unlocked fire magic and whips up some mushrooms and jerky with a sprinkle of seasoning. Then as he digs in, he's surprised at how decent it tastes. He also realizes how clutch the villager set is: frying pan, knives, everything. While looking over his gear, he starts to question whether Villager A was really just a villager or a survivalist. After his meal, he sits back and starts thinking about what he's going to do next. He then continues exploring the forest, thinking that the cave will serve as his base of operations for now, and the next on his agenda is setting up some proper safety measures. Then along the way, he gathers some herbs and more mushrooms, but quickly realizes that monsters are going to be his biggest headache. Just as he thinks that, he senses some presences nearby and he sees it's two goblins. Panic sets in, but then he figures these guys are small fry, though their stats are higher than he expected. Haruka wonders if he stands a chance, but he knows that if he wants to keep exploring, there's no way around this fight. He decides to wrap his cane using his packing ability, which coats objects in magic and gives them various boosts, and surprisingly it works pretty well. With newfound confidence, Haruka resolves to work hard and surpass his classmates who scored cheat skills. He charges at the goblins, his glowing cane in hand, and easily takes down the first one. The second goblin attacks, but its moves are too predictable, and Haruka dodges them without much trouble. And with a quick burst of magic from his cane, he finishes the second one off. By the time evening rolls around, Haruka is cleaning up at the river, feeling proud that he survived his first battle, and he reflects that today was a good day. He then exhaustedly heads back to the cave, eats some mushrooms, and notices a wooden club he picked up from the goblins. He quickly dismisses it, thinking it's useless. It's too short in range and a bit too heavy. His trusty cane is way more efficient. Checking his stats, he's surprised to see that he leveled up just by whacking a couple of goblins, but he's not complaining. He also discovers he's gained a new skill called Magic Infusion, and notices that his calisthenics level has gone up. By day 3, Haruka is already sick of eating mushrooms every damn day. He craves some meat and even laughs to himself, imagining how his class rep would definitely scold him for complaining. He then begrudgingly swallows the mushrooms and then decides to check out the Magic Infusion skill he picked up the other day. Turns out it cloaks his body with magic and enhances it. And on top of that, it empowers his magical defense and physical control. He then also notices that his appraisal skill leveled up to level 2. However, instead of being thrilled, he's confused. It now shows question marks on some of the things he tries to appraise, so he annoyedly wonders if it's more of a downgrade than an upgrade. Shrugging it off, Haruka heads into the forest intending to practice some magic. But his focus is soon shattered when he spots yet another mushroom. Disappointed, he laments the lack of meat and sarcastically wonders why meat doesn't grow on trees. Then he remembers he's supposed to be practicing magic, not foraging. He activates his Magic Infusion skill again and starts running around the forest, feeling surprisingly light on his feet. His dexterity is off the charts. While exploring, he encounters some goblins that are a bit stronger than the ones he faced earlier, but they're still no match. He defeats them more easily than yesterday, and the confidence kicks in. He starts thinking he could probably take on 3 goblins at once now. But just as he's getting cocky, he spots 3 muscular goblins up ahead. His confidence evaporates instantly, and he ducks for cover. Realizing he's outmatched, Haruka ducks and hides immediately. He then starts slipping away quietly, fully aware he's not ready for that shit. Over the next few days, he sticks to a routine, hunting goblins during the day and studying magic by night. On day 5, Haruka manages to take down a goblin with a single strike, and he also spends some time renovating his cave house, adding a gate and some not-so-fancy furniture to make it more livable. Later that night, he finally gets lucky and hunts down a rabbit for some much-needed meat. After catching the damn thing, he's pretty pumped, thinking he'll actually get to eat something other than mushrooms for once. But just as he's about to celebrate, he senses someone approaching. To his annoyance, it's the group of gals from his class. Not wanting to get mixed up with their drama, he ducks out of sight. But then he senses the damn delinquents are nearby too, and he is definitely not in the mood to deal with them either. Using his clairvoyance, Haruka scans the area and realizes the entire class is here, including the class reps group. He doesn't want to get involved with the other group's shit, but for a second, he thinks maybe he should at least stay high to the class rep, given that they've known each other since grade school. But then he snaps out of it. He's not about to start acting like a simp. In fact, he's enjoying the freedom of being completely isolated, and for the first time, no one telling him what to do. No drama, no distractions. He can live exactly how he wants, and with that thought, Haruka decides he's better off conquering this world on his own, without his classmates dragging him down to their shit. He suddenly ducks into a bush, trying to stay hidden as the delinquents approach. One of them, suspicious, says he's sure he heard something and starts closing in on the bushes where Haruka is hiding. As he checks inside, all he finds is the bunny, so he and the others move on. Haruka lets out a sigh of relief. It didn't spot him. Still, curiosity gets the better of him, and he decides to tail them, hoping to figure out if they're up to something. As he listens in, he quickly realizes the delinquents are just having an embarrassingly perverse conversation about the girl's melon measurements. Haruka is disappointed, having expected to learn something useful. With no real rules or consequences in this world, he's a bit worried about what these idiots might do to the girls. But he reassures himself the class rep will probably handle it. She always does. Just as he's about to tune out, Haruka overhears the delinquents plotting to use some poor nerd named Tanaka for his abilities to do whatever they want. That's when Haruka knows they're up to no good. But getting involved, that would require actual social interaction, and let's face it, Haruka is completely against that. He retreats back to his cave and starts grilling some mushrooms, trying to shake off the whole thing. But then he notices something that hits him like a truck. His loner skill just leveled up. Even his status board now officially recognizes him as a loner. It probably leveled because he avoided his classmates all day, but still, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. Honestly, he wouldn't mind leveling up more, considering his overall level is stuck at a measly 3. The real issue, though, is his 2 skills, Master of None and Dummy skills. He has no clue how to level them up or what they even do. Master of None seems straightforward. He'll be decent at most things, but never truly master anything. As for Dummy skills, Haruka figures it might have something to do with puppets, but he's not really sure. So he decides to stop thinking about it for now and just focus on eating his dinner, but he still wishes he had some damn meat. Haruka calls it a night and tries to drift off to sleep, but a loud commotion outside makes that impossible, so he reluctantly gets up to see what's going on. He expects to find the usual delinquents causing trouble, but to his surprise, it's not them this time. It's the nerds. They're in the middle of fighting a group of goblins, but they're clearly struggling. Haruka considers stepping in to help, but then he checks their stats. To his disbelief, their skills are leagues above his, and they're all level 16 while he's still stuck at level 3. He figures they've got this under control, so he turns to leave. But just as he's about to walk away, Haruka spots 2 goblins sneaking up behind the nerds. Given how much trouble they're already having, an attack from behind would wipe them out for sure. Haruka hesitates, still unsure if he should get involved. But then he remembers the time the nerds shared their holographic Charizard with him back in the day. That memory is enough to push him over the edge. These guys are worth saving. So without another thought, Haruka charges out of the bushes, stick in hand, and one-shots both goblins in a single swing. The nerds, wide-eyed and stunned, turn to see Haruka standing there. He asks if they're okay, and while they're physically fine, they're shocked to see Haruka out here in the wild. After some awkward reacquainting, the nerds thank him profusely, but Haruka finds it difficult to hold a conversation after all. It's been ages since he's had a proper chat with anyone. Eventually, Haruka leads them back to his cave, and the nerds are blown away by the place. Despite it being a cave, the interior is cozy and well-designed. Haruka explains that he picked up some earth magic and crafting skills to remodel the place, but the nerds still think it's incredible that he did it all on his own. He offers them drinks and asks what they were doing in the woods so late at night. That's when the mood shifts. The nerds go quiet, exchanging uneasy glances, and after a few moments of silence, they finally admit that they're on the run from the rest of the class. It all started when the class got teleported into this new world. At first, everyone was just shocked by what had happened, completely blindsided. But soon reality hit. They were stuck here and panic set in. Some were calmer about it though. The popular girls seemed more annoyed than scared, as if this whole situation was just ruining their day. The delinquents were trying to figure things out, but their lack of Isekai knowledge wasn't helping. Meanwhile, the nerds were thriving. This was their moment. The class rep was just as confused as everyone else, but she had enough common sense to know that balling in the middle of an unknown forest was a sure way to attract predators and get everyone killed. So she immediately tried to get the class to calm down. But of course it was too late. A group of goblins had already caught wind of them. The class rep, who usually has everything under control, was completely out of her depth when it came to monsters and started to freak out. Naturally, the rest of the class followed suit. Even the delinquents were shaking it, as we expected. The nerds, however, knew someone had to take charge, so they activated their skills and got to work taking down the goblins. Even the gym bros joined in. Before long, the goblins were defeated, but the class still wasn't safe. The class rep, pulling herself together, got everyone's attention and made it clear they needed to find somewhere safe to stay before they got ambushed again. A little while later, they set up camp by the river. The nerds, of all their vast Isekai knowledge, took it upon themselves to teach everyone the basics of survival in this world. At first, things seemed to be going smoothly. The class divided duties evenly, and everyone was pitching in. But then, out of nowhere, the popular girls decided that they are not going to do any damn work anymore. The class rep tried to reason with them, saying all they had to do was help set up the tents, but the girls couldn't be bothered. And of course, since the popular girls weren't doing anything, the delinquents thought, why should we do any shit? And they decided to be lazy too. This left the class rep and the nerds doing all the work, setting up camp, gathering supplies, handling every single task. On top of that, the nerds took on the added responsibility of dealing with all the monsters that kept trying to attack the camp. It was a heavy load, but they knew they had to do it for their own survival too. Back in the White Room, the nerds saw two particularly disturbing skills get chosen. One was a charm spell that granted control over people, and the other was a puppeteer skill, which basically did the same thing. The nerds knew one of the delinquents had picked up the puppeteer skill, so they realized they needed to level up fast if they wanted any chance of defending themselves against them. At night, the delinquents would go out hunting monsters too, but only to grind levels so they could unlock their twisted skills. While eavesdropping on them one evening, the nerds overheard something chilling. The delinquents were already planning to use their newfound power to turn the girls into their slaves once they were strong enough. The nerds knew they had to act, so they rushed to warn the class rep. Unfortunately, just a few days later, the delinquents had leveled up enough to start using their skills. Unluckily, the class rep just happened to be nearby, so they set their sights on making her their first victim. But before they could make their move, the nerds jumped them. The delinquents were taken down and their skills were sealed away, making sure they wouldn't be able to hurt anyone. The powerless delinquents were no longer a threat, and as expected, the girls were furious when they learned what had been planned. The delinquents were immediately kicked out of camp. That should have been the end of it, but the delinquents, being the petty jerks they were, decided to take revenge. Later that night, while the nerds were away, the delinquents launched a sneak attack, not to take control, but purely to cause chaos, so they set the entire camp on fire, burning everything to the ground. By the time the nerds got back, they were devastated. Everything they'd worked so hard to build was gone. To make matters worse, the popular girls somehow twisted the situation, blaming the nerds for provoking the delinquents and causing the destruction. Thankfully, the class rep stepped in, reminding everyone that the nerds were the only reason they'd survived this long. While the nerds appreciated her defending them, they had enough. Staying in a camp full of ungrateful people wasn't worth it anymore, and so they decided to leave and go on the run. After hearing the nerds' whole story, Haruka genuinely feels bad for them, so he decides to host a mushroom feast that night. Surprisingly, he finds himself actually enjoying the company, which is a rare thing for him. But the next day, the nerds have to leave. They're planning to head downstream to find a village and start fresh as adventurers. Before they go, they invite Haruka to join them, seeing him as a friend. While Haruka does consider them friends, he declines because he's convinced that his trash skills would only slow them down. Even so, he's a bit uneasy about the situation back at the class camp, mainly because the class rep, the only other person in class he respects, is still there. He decides to check out the camp and see what's going on. On his way, he randomly encounters a kobold. It bites him a few times like a mad dog, but he eventually manages to kill it and continues his journey. By the time night falls, Haruka reaches the riverside where the class camp should have been. But to his surprise, the place is completely deserted. Figuring it must have moved, he uses one of his detection skills to track footprints and follows the trail until he eventually stumbles upon the popular girls. Of all the people in his class, Haruka despises dealing with them the most, so he immediately tries to turn around and head home. But it's too late. They've already started chasing after him. Normally, Haruka would have no problem outrunning them, but he freezes in place when he hears them say the word please. In all the years he's known them, please has never once been in their vocabulary. Something serious must have happened to make them this desperate, so against his better judgment, he decides to hear them out. The first thing they ask is if he knows where the nerds went. Haruka hesitates, suspecting that they just want to berate the nerds some more. But to his surprise, the girls actually want to apologize. They come to realize just how much the nerds were doing for them all along, and they genuinely want to make amends for the way they treated them. But by now, the nerds are long gone, and there's no way the girls could ever catch up to them. For starters, they can't even navigate the woods alone, let alone defend themselves against the monsters lurking about. Haruka asks them how they plan to find the nerds if they can't even handle basic survival, and then he asks them if they even have the resolve to do whatever it takes to apologize. But the girls just break down in tears, knowing they wouldn't last a day out there on their own, so they beg Haruka to teach them how to survive. Haruka, completely blindsided by their sudden desperation, agrees before he can even process what he's saying. And that's when Haruka's subjugate ability kicks in, and without warning, the girls become his subservient followers, so their blank stares are now fixed on him, and that terrifies him. Then whenever Haruka gets into a fight, they jump in to finish off the monsters, and then present the magic crystals to him like eager puppies waiting for approval. Haruka isn't happy with how this is turning out. He didn't sign up for this, and now the whole situation feels wrong. One of the girls has a small injury on her arm, so Haruka feels responsible and hands her a healing potion he made, expecting her to use it on herself, but instead she uses it on him. He's getting increasingly frustrated. Everything they do is only for his benefit now, and he's starting to get sick of it. What's worse, he can't figure out how to undo the subjugate ability, and if he runs into the class rep, how on earth is he going to explain this? Just as he's stressing over how to release the girls from his control, the class rep appears. She tries talking to him, but Haruka is too wrapped up in his thoughts about breaking the servitude to notice her. It's only when she shouts in his ear that he snaps back to reality, realizing she's standing right next to him. Meanwhile, the delinquents are still scheming, planning to carry out their twisted ambitions with the girls, so eventually they decided to deal with anyone who might stand in their way first. Then we see Haruka panicking because he's clueless about what to say to the class rep, and come to think of it, he doesn't even know her name. They have been in the same class since elementary school, and she's always been nice to him, so she can't believe this idiot never bothered to learn her name. A few moments later, the rest of the girls from class show up. Of course, everyone except the popular girls is following the class rep's orders. Speaking of those popular girls, the class rep spots them standing behind Haruka, but they look like they're sharing a single brain cell at the moment, so she figures Haruka must have done something to them. He'd love to say he's innocent, but the ugly truth is, even if he didn't mean to, his skills somehow turned them into his servants, and now he's stuck with this mess. He tries to explain without sounding like the villain, but none of the girls believe him. So Haruka just gives up trying to clear his name and starts to walk off. Too bad for him, the class rep won't let him go that easily, so she forces him to stay while she checks on Shimazaki to see if she's okay. Fortunately for him, a little shaking is all it took to snap her out of it, and Shimazaki reassures the class rep that she's fine, which gives the rep some relief. Haruka, on the other hand, thinks this is his cue to finally leave, but of course the class rep still wants to know how the whole subjugation thing happened in the first place, so she's not letting Haruka go this easy. Then while the girls are chatting, Haruka is left alone by a tree, and since he's got nothing better to do, he decides to practice his magic. He figures he'll try expanding his house once he gets home, so he starts experimenting, trying to figure out how to make a basement, but being Haruka, he messes it up and ends up burying himself in the ground from the neck down. So he's stuck like that and sat waiting until the class rep found him. She's completely shocked to see him buried in the dirt, especially since she only asked him to wait a few minutes. But hey, boredom makes people do dumb stuff. She then goes over Haruka's head and pulls him out of the dirt, and once he's free, she apologizes for not trusting him. Apparently, Shimazaki told her that Haruka was just trying to help everyone. Haruka doesn't remember offering to help everyone, but the class rep and the other girls are already thanking him, so he just rolls with it. Then with everything settled, Haruka is ready to head home. But the girls start getting mad because he's about to leave them stranded in the wilderness without offering any help. That's when the class rep catches on. Haruka just mentioned having a home, so she immediately asks him about it, and Haruka casually explains that he had some spare time and just built a house. The class rep is floored because she can't believe this guy managed to build an entire house by himself, while they've been struggling to manage a camp. The other girls are just as impressed, so they huddle together, holding a quick meeting. The class rep asks Haruka how many people his house can accommodate. Haruka, trying to think it through, says it could fit about 200 people, though they have to move some furniture around and maybe drain the indoor pool. The class rep, green with envy at how well Haruka's doing for himself, reluctantly asks if she and the other girls can stay the night since they're all kind of homeless at the moment. Haruka freaks out internally. It's one thing to let a few guys crash at your place, but this is a whole class full of girls. So the thought of that shit makes him feel hot like hell, but still, he manages to calm himself down. And once he's composed, Haruka leads them all toward his house. And thanks to all the time he spent wandering through these woods, Haruka is way better at navigating than the girls, and one of his skills even gives him helpful tips, keeping him headed in the right direction. Eventually, Haruka makes it back to his house with the girls in tow, and after catching their breath, they're absolutely floored by the sight. It's been ages since they had a proper roof over their heads or enjoyed the luxury of indoor plumbing. Then the moment Haruka mentions there's a bath over that way, the girls practically stampede toward it, stripping down right in front of him. Haruka's brain short-circuits. There's no way he can survive a whole night under the same roof with them. So thinking quickly, he sets up a tent outside to get some much-needed alone time and prepares to sleep. But just when he's about to settle in, the class rep walks into his tent. There's something she wants to talk about. First, she thanks him for all his help, because without him she wouldn't have had a clue what to do. After the nerds bailed, the gym bros also left, leaving the girls to fend for themselves. It's been rough, but now that they had a bath and a decent meal, the girls are finally in high spirits again. Even so, the class rep admits she feels like a failure as their representative because she couldn't fix the situation on her own. But Haruka thinks she's being way too hard on herself because up until now, she's been the one protecting and keeping the girls together. She admits that may be true. They got lucky not running into any monsters. If they had, she would have been powerless to protect the class, unlike the nerds. But Haruka speaks again and points out that she's not being fair to herself because the nerds have basically spent their whole lives preparing for something like this, so of course they could handle it. But for her, this is the first time she's ever even heard of isekai. So considering all things she's done, it's a damn good job. Hearing that the class rep feels a lot better, though she still can't help but compare her accomplishments to Haruka's. After all, he built a fully functioning house in just a week. Then she wishes him a good night and heads back inside. But with everything that's happened today, there's no way Haruka's getting any sleep in this hot tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka is woken up by one of the girls sitting outside his tent, telling him to get up because breakfast is ready. He is still half asleep, so it takes him a moment to realize what's happening. But when it hits him, he starts freaking out a little and protests by saying that he wants to sleep in a little longer. The girl, however, isn't having it and climbs on top of him, trying to coax him out of bed. Haruka defeatedly gives in and asks what's for breakfast. He expects the usual, mushroom soup with a side of even more mushrooms. But to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today. So excited, he accidentally headbutts the girl in his enthusiasm. She's a little hurt, but Haruka's too thrilled to care because finally he gets to eat something other than mushrooms, and he's loving every bite. The class rep, confused by his excitement, asks why he's so worked up about eating fish when he's been living next to the river this whole time. Haruka admits that while that's true, he absolutely sucks at fishing, which is why he's never managed to catch any. Seeing how the girls seem so accustomed to eating fish, Haruka asks how they managed to catch them so easily. The class rep agrees to show him and takes Haruka to the river, along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill. Her method is simple but effective. She just electrocutes the water until the fish well stop being alive. Haruka is amazed and begs her to do it again. Though she's reluctant, she agrees since Haruka has been helping out. She summons another ball of lightning, but before she can throw it in the river, Haruka quickly grabs it and seals it with his packing skill. He tosses it into the water himself and catches some fish, but on top of that, he gains lightning magic as well, meaning he won't need Lightning Girl's help anymore. The class rep then confusedly asks what he just did, so Haruka explains that by using his packing skill on a particular element, he gains that type of magic. It's probably a result of all the different skills he has, which is definitely useful. But in Haruka's mind, he's still stuck with a bunch of useless abilities. Then, while the other girls splash around in the river, Haruka sits with the class rep and asks what she and the others plan to do next. The class rep admits the details are still a bit unclear, but their goal is to head for the nearest village and try to catch up with the nerds. However, she adds they'll need to level up if they're going to make it out of this forest on their own. So Haruka, trying to be helpful, offers to train them before they leave. Then not long after, all the girls are gathered in the forest for Haruka's impromptu training camp. But before they start, Haruka asks what their current levels are. When they tell them they're all above level 15, Haruka feels an immediate pang of depression because he's still stuck at level 7 after all this time in the forest, so he begins to wonder if they even need his help at all. Then, to test their abilities, he sets them up to fight a group of kobolds to see how they handle themselves. The girls think this will be a walk in the park since the kobolds are only level 6, but a few moments later, all of them had their butts handed to them and they were knocked out on the ground. Turns out, none of them expected the kobolds to actually fight back, so bruised and humiliated, they retreat to regroup and strategize. But oddly enough, the strategy meeting ends up taking place inside Haruka's magic tent. Thanks to its ability to expand, they all fit comfortably, but Haruka still has no idea why they chose his damn tent for this. After some deliberation, the girls head back out confident they got it this time. Haruka is glad they're feeling motivated, but in the back of his mind, he's not convinced they'll win round 2 either. Then once they leave, the girl who woke him up that morning approaches him looking a bit sheepish. She apologizes for her behavior earlier. Apparently, she was deliberately getting close to him to see if he tried to take advantage of the situation. She admits she didn't trust him at first, but now, after he's given them shelter, food, and even offered to train them, she feels like she can trust him. So she adds that she'll be back tomorrow to wake him up with breakfast again. Haruka, feeling relieved that she trusts him now, smiles and says he's looking forward to tomorrow. However, since he still doesn't know her name, he decides he'll just call her Fish Girl for now. The next morning, Haruka is thrilled to get another fish from Fish Girl, but then overhears the other girls talking about going back to fight the kobolds for revenge. But before they can rush off, the class rep calls them back, reminding them that they'll definitely lose again if they don't train first, so she suggests they start by fighting goblins instead. However, when the girls actually face off against the goblins, it's a complete disaster. But despite this setback, some of the girls are still convinced they're ready for a kobold rematch, while others start mysteriously coming down with sudden illnesses to avoid fighting anymore. Haruka doesn't have high hopes for this, and he's fully prepared to jump in if things go south. But to his surprise, the girls actually learn from their mistakes with the goblins and manage to work together to defeat the kobolds. The class rep congratulates them on their victory, and Haruka feels a wave of relief because this means the girls can handle themselves now, and he can finally go back to his peaceful life as a loner. But at least that's what he thinks, because the class rep walks over and thanks him for agreeing to come with them to the nearest village. Haruka knows for a fact that he never said he'd join them, but class rep is pretty insistent, so in the end he caves and agrees to go with her. A little while later, everyone's packed up and ready to leave the forest. Haruka reminds them they don't know what dangers they might run into out there, so they should stay on guard. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, one of the boys from their class is seen frantically running for his life. He makes the mistake of looking back and trips over a rock, only to find himself cornered by his attacker. And with no escape, he's strangled to death in the instant. Later, we see Haruka wandering through the forest with the girls, and he's thinking, alright, gotta keep these girls safe from those delinquents, but first they need to get out of the woods. Then boom, they run into an orc. The girls dive for cover, and Haruka steps up to fight. He declares like a total show-off that he's about to teach them a thing or two about fighting. He charges at the orc, and the monster swings, but surprisingly it can't find him after the attack. Turns out, Haruka's hiding behind a tree laughing at the orc's sheer stupidity. He recalls that the nerds told him orcs are tough against physical attacks, but can be taken down with enough magic. So he checks his abilities and spots something called Grand Magic. He discovers that Grand Magic includes fire, water, earth, and wind spells. Turns out he got most of them from his packing skill. Everything except fire magic. He thinks to himself even the dumbest skills can come in handy sometimes. Right then the orc finds him. It swings again, but Haruka dodges like it's nothing. He smacks it on the head, tells it to calm the hell down. But instead of chilling out, the orc just up and dies. Haruka's left blinking in shock because physical attacks weren't supposed to work on it. Meanwhile, the girls give him death stares because that didn't teach them shit about fighting. Next, they run into another orc. This time, Haruka busts out some fire magic from his temperature skill, and he takes the monster out in one hit. Haruka's shocked again, and the girls, now thoroughly annoyed, point out that they're not going to learn squat if he keeps nuking the monsters in a single blow. The scene then shifts to the girls having dinner at night, while Haruka sets up traps around their campsite to catch any monsters that might try to attack. He's convinced his tent will help keep the monsters away and also alert him to any danger, so with the traps and the tent, he figures it should be enough to look after the girls. He then glances at the map he got from his appraisal skill and notices the river curves ahead, and he starts thinking about which route they should take from here on. But suddenly, his perception skill kicks in, and he senses something nearby. Thinking it could be monsters, he goes to check it out, only to find humans instead. He assumes they're the delinquents at first, but it turns out to be the jocks, so Haruka is relieved and glad it's just them. And we see that the class rep sees them talking to Haruka from a distance. Haruka then asks the jocks why they're here, jokingly wondering if they're after the girls too. The jocks deny it, saying they're not here for the girls, they came looking for him. Haruka, in his typical snarky way, wonders if they're into boys now, but the jocks, clearly irritated, assure him they're not. Then when Haruka asks why they're hiding from the girls, the jocks reveal that they don't trust anyone at the moment. They remind Haruka of the skill they learned about that's even more dangerous than puppeteer or charm. So Haruka quickly realizes they're talking about the hijack skill. The jocks explain that while the delinquents made a big fuss about the puppeteer and charm skills, they never mentioned hijack, which means they don't have it. But someone else might. Sensing an opportunity, Haruka decides to mess with the jocks a bit by pretending he has the hijack skill. But the jocks don't seem fazed. They say they'd be fine even if he did. Then they ask if he really has it, and Haruka admits he doesn't but reveals that he learned the subjugate skill instead. The jocks freak out, thinking it's even worse, but they reassure themselves that it's probably okay since Haruka's a loner and will always stay that way. But Haruka unbotheredly points out that there's nothing wrong with being a loner. The jocks then say their only reason for coming was to warn him about the hijack skill, then ask him to be careful. They plan to keep an eye on the delinquents from now on and ask Haruka to apologize to the class rep and the girls for them. He agrees and they leave, completely unaware that the class rep overheard the entire conversation. The next day, Haruka tells the girls they're heading back into the forest and asks them to gear up. They all nod, eager and ready to fight, and Haruka can't help but wonder if they ate something weird for breakfast because they're way too pumped. As he steps away from the group, the class rep pulls him aside, asking if they can talk in private. Once alone, she tries to bring up what the jocks had told him. Haruka suddenly remembers they wanted him to apologize for them, so he does, but that's not what the class rep is here to talk about. She looks nervous, hesitant to say what's really on her mind. Seeing her uneasy behavior, Haruka immediately pieces it together. She's the one with the hijack skill. The class rep is shocked, asking how he figured it out since this was supposed to be a secret between her and the nerds. Haruka smirks, saying it only took him one look to figure it out. He can't believe the jocks were too stupid to notice. The class rep, still puzzled, asks why he helped her if he knew. She wonders if he's not afraid of her, considering what hijack can do, but Haruka unbotheredly tells her there's no reason for him to be afraid. The class rep then explains that hijack is a skill that steals someone's abilities by taking their life, something that would terrify anyone. But Haruka shrugs it off, repeating that he's not scared. He's sure the nerds felt the same way too. They locked away the puppeteer and charm skills, but they left hers alone, which told him everything he needed to know. She's confused by his words, but Haruka clarifies. The nerds were actually relieved that she was the one who ended up with the hijack skill. He says he feels the same, and upon hearing this, the class rep breaks down in tears of relief and joy. Haruka, ever the tease, tells her she's been crying too much lately, to which she snaps back that's all his fault. Laughing, he bolts, pretending to run away in fear of being blamed for her tears. Later, we see the students taking a break after traveling for a while, and Haruka brings some juice for everyone, but of course he jokes about charging them for it. The class rep, not amused, gets angry and tells him to stop trying to make a profit off his friends. Laughing it off, they all continue their journey. Haruka notes that they're ahead of schedule, but still it looks like they'll be stuck camping again tonight. He spots then a river and thinks it's the perfect opportunity to try something, so he asks the class rep and the others to handle things here while he goes ahead to scout. The class rep offers to go with him, but he tells her to stay put and keep an eye on things, then takes off ahead. After getting some distance away, Haruka uses his magic wrap skill to cloak himself in magic and also uses his weight magic to make himself lighter. With his reduced weight, he starts jumping from one tree to another like some kind of ninja, thinking to himself how handy these skills are. But of course, in his excitement, he jumps way too high and ends up gawking at the view. Right before plummeting down with no way to cushion his fall, he crashes face first into the ground, barely surviving thanks to the magic wrap protecting him. Later that night, he limps back to camp all beat up. The class rep, immediately suspicious, asks how scouting could leave him looking like he just lost a fight. Haruka sheepishly admits that he got a little carried away, jumped too high, and ended up face-planting. The class rep, irritated at his stupidity, gets angry with him. So in a lame attempt to calm her down, he offers her some berries, but she's not having it and storms off, leaving him standing there. The next day, they make great progress thanks to Haruka's scouting, despite his earlier mishap. Along the way, they face some fun and scary situations, but they manage to get through all of them pretty easily. After more traveling, they finally make it out of the forest. The girls are thrilled to see open plains ahead, thinking the town might be close now. Haruka, however, starts to get more cautious, knowing they're more exposed out in the open. He notices the hills in front of them are blocking his view, so he checks his stats and discovers he's got a new skill called Air Walk. Without hesitation, he uses it and literally starts walking on air. The class rep, understandably shocked, yells up at him, but Haruka's too caught up testing out his new skill to even hear her. After a while, Haruka finally notices the class rep calling out to him, and she asks if he's going to be okay being so high up. He casually replies that it's all good, and mentions he's just checking the area to make sure everything's safe. Scanning the surroundings, he spots some people being attacked by monsters. He reports this back to the class rep, and immediately she insists that they have to help. But Haruka, ever the cynic, points out that just because they're getting attacked by monsters doesn't automatically mean they're good people, and he knows how the girls tend to be too trusting. The class rep wants to send their fastest runner to help those people, but Haruka tells her it's pointless. They won't make it in time. He raises the possibility that they could be bandits, saying it might be safer to just let things play out. But of course, the class rep is having none of that. She firmly states that if they're bad guys, she'll handle them. But if they're innocent, she wants to help. Haruka rolls his eyes internally, knowing she'd say something like that. So he agrees to go save them himself, leaving the girls surprised. Realizing he can't run fast enough to make it in time, Haruka thinks about what to do. Magic wrap and weight magic won't be enough this time, so he decides to try something new. Using magic wrap to enhance his physical abilities and weight magic to make himself lighter, he adds wind magic to launch himself into the sky. But unfortunately, the class rep gets caught up in the gust as well. As Haruka soars through the air, he kicks off with his new airwalk skill, propelling himself forward. He's impressed, thinking that with these skills he can go anywhere he wants. But suddenly, he realizes the class rep is hanging on to him and asks what the heck she's doing there. She explains that she got swept up in his wind magic and tells him to stop. They're already at their destination. But Haruka, of course, casually drops the bomb that he hasn't quite figured out how to stop. They crash straight into the monsters, attacking the people, accidentally defeating them in the process. Haruka, picking himself up, asks the people if they're all right. One of them, still in shock, responds that they should be the ones asking him that question. Still, they thank him for saving them, not entirely sure how they survived that chaotic rescue. The leader of the group then introduces himself as Oftir, and his friend follows up with his name Gegtek. Haruka is relieved that they don't have any language barriers to deal with. He then asks why they were getting attacked by monsters, so they explain that merchants have been getting ambushed in the area recently, and the Adventurers Guild put out a quest to wipe out the monsters. Thinking it would be easy money, they took the job, but quickly realized they were way out of their league. Haruka then spots a massive wolf nearby and learns that it's a creature called the Big Green Wolf. Oftir then tells his team to gather whatever's left of their stuff, but they're clearly frustrated about failing the mission. With nothing better to do until the girls arrive, Haruka decides to cook up some mushrooms for the adventurers. As they eat, they realize they're being served stamina caps, a rare and valuable find. They're shocked that Haruka's sharing something so precious, and Haruka, in typical fashion, is surprised these mushrooms are even rare. He learns that stamina caps not only restore energy but also help heal wounds. Eventually, the class rep wakes up, and not long after, the rest of the girls catch up. They're stunned when they see a real elf and a knight immediately swarming the adventurers like they're models on a runway. The adventurers, now back on their feet, guide everyone toward the town. After some time, Omyu finally comes into view, so the girls ecstatically sprint toward the town and the whole group enters together. The scene then shifts to the delinquents, who are busy leveling up their abilities. Feeling confident after their training, they decide they're finally ready to go after the girls. But Tanaka suggests they target the group of nerds first, since they can force them to unlock the puppeteer and charm skills. So the delinquents love the idea and quickly agree, unaware that the jocks have been eavesdropping on their entire plan. Back in Omyu Town, the girls are practically bouncing through the streets, hyped up by all the wonders civilization has to offer. They're gushing over everything, but class rep quickly reminds them that they're flat broke and have a mountain of stuff still left to do. She rushes off to round up the excited girls while Haruka watches with a grin, thinking to himself that now that he's gotten everyone safely to the city, they shouldn't need him anymore. That means he can finally slip back into his peaceful, carefree learner lifestyle. Meanwhile, class rep is struggling to keep the girls under control, and in desperation she asks Haruka to lend a hand. But Haruka's already kicked back, chilling in the shade because his work is done, or so he thinks. Class rep frustratedly gets it. He's relieved to be in the city, but there's still so much left to handle. So she blows her whistle, rallying the girls into order, and lays out her plan. First, they'll head to the Adventurers Guild to sell all the loot they've gathered on their journey. Then they'll register with the guild and rent an inn for the night. While they're at it, they'll also ask around to see if anyone's spotted the nerds lately. It's a solid plan, but the popular girls immediately take offense, annoyed that class rep is treating the nerds like some side quest. She quickly apologizes, but Haruka can't resist poking fun at the popular girls for caring so much about the nerds in the first place. A little while later, the group makes their way to the Adventurers Guild, and it's way more intimidating than Haruka expected. The second they step inside, they're hit with hostile stares, and Haruka's gut is screaming at him to back out. Before he can even think about it, Oftir tells him that the guild master wants to meet him. Haruka figures it is not a great sign, so he tells the class rep to get the girls registered while he heads upstairs to see what the guild master wants. Upstairs, the vibe is even worse. Everyone looks scarier, and Haruka's nerves are shot. At the end of the room, Gegtek is waiting and leads him to the guild master's office. Haruka walks in, bracing for the worst as he comes face to face with a menacing-looking guy. But to his surprise, the guild master just wanted to thank him for saving Oftir and his party, so all that worry was for nothing. After that's done, Haruka heads back downstairs and spots a counter, figuring that's where you go to sell magic stones, so he walks up and asks the attendant. She confirms, so Haruka casually dumps a pile of stones out of his bag. There's a lot more where that came from, but before he can pull out the rest, the poor attendant tells him to stop. Apparently, he's just dropped 2 days worth of overtime on her desk, so she asks him to come back tomorrow so she can finish appraising the ones he's already handed over. Haruka's not in a rush, so he agrees, and besides, the girls have all finished registering as adventurers, which means it's his turn. Haruka heads confidently into the registration room to get assessed, But his smug grin doesn't last long. The guild worker hits him with the bad news. He's too weak to become an adventurer. Turns out, you need to be at least level 10 to register, and even then, you'd have to join a party to qualify. If Haruka wants to register as a solo adventurer, he needs to be at least level 20, but he's only level 9, and thanks to his loner skill, he can't form a party anyway, so it looks like he's stuck being unemployed for a while. Later that night, class rep leads everyone to the lodging the guild arranged for them. But when they finally get there, Haruka starts to freak out because it looks a lot like a love hotel. He calms down after realizing it isn't, and everyone says goodnight before heading off to their separate rooms. The next morning, they all meet up at a diner for breakfast, and class rep excitedly tells them that the town is supposed to be really safe, so they're free to explore and do whatever they want. The girls are thrilled and start planning a shopping trip for later, and seeing that they can handle themselves from here on out, Haruka decides he'll head back into the woods as soon as he gets paid for his crystals. After breakfast, Haruka heads to the guild to check if his magic stones have been appraised, but when he arrives, he's met with sincere apologies from the staff. Turns out, they don't have enough money on hand to pay him all at once. The guild master then steps out personally to apologize, asking Haruka if he'd be willing to accept payment in installments. Haruka, laid back as usual, says he's fine with it, and the guild master breathes a sigh of relief, grateful for Haruka's understanding. In the meantime, the guild master hands over what they've already appraised, and it's 8 million ere in that bag. And from what Haruka and class rep have figured out since arriving in Onyu, the currency's value is pretty much the same as back on Earth, which means Haruka just hit the jackpot. The payout is massive because Haruka brought in more F-rank stones than the guild has ever seen, and on top of that, he took down some green wolves, which bumped up the reward even more. Sitting on a small fortune, Haruka decides to do some shopping before heading back to the forest, so Gatek chimes in, saying he knows a spot Haruka might want to check out. Naturally, Haruka assumes he's being led to an adult establishment, but much to his disappointment, Gatek takes him to a rundown weapon shop instead. The shop specializes in rare gear collected from dungeons, and since Haruka is a bit of an odd case, Gatek figured this would be the perfect place for him to gear up. Sure, the place looks like it might fall apart any second, but Gatek swears the quality is top-notch. Haruka, trusting Gatek's judgment, decides to give it a shot. The equipment might look weird, but the effects they offer are next level, so Haruka ends up spending the entire day browsing and buying as much as he can afford. Just as he's about to wrap up, he spots a necklace that catches his eye. It looks pretty decent, but when he uses his appraisal skill, the only description he gets is Fits 7. It's the same cryptic message he got when appraising his villager set earlier, so he curiously asks the shopkeeper if he knows what Fits 7 is supposed to mean. The shopkeeper explains that the necklace allows the wearer to combine the effects of up to 7 different items and use them all at once, so Haruka's eyes light up because this sounds incredibly useful. If the effect also applies to his villager set, it means he can stack even more effects onto his gear. He's about to start sorting through items for the best combinations, but right then, class rep bursts in, yelling at him for staying out so late. Haruka, realizing he's been here for hours, admits he still has a lot more he wants to try out. As he's holding one of the items, it suddenly reacts, and before he can process what's happening, all the items in front of him fuse into one. The shopkeeper, understandably furious, reminds Haruka he hasn't paid for any of it yet, and all that gear had cost him well over 10 million ere to acquire. Haruka starts panicking, knowing he doesn't have that kind of money, so Gatek steps in, pleading with the shopkeeper to accept Haruka's 8 million as a compromise. The next day, Haruka is sulking because he blew all his cash and is now flat broke. He'd love to head out and gather more crystals, but the problem is, you're not allowed to leave town to hunt monsters unless you're a registered adventurer. And of course, he's already tried sneaking out with some of the girls, but class rep caught him and gave him another earful. Now he's come up with a perfect plan to escape unnoticed. His villager cloak got combined with an invisibility cloak, so he figures this is his ticket to slip out of the city without anyone realizing. He sneaks past class rep and the girls, feeling a bit guilty for not saying goodbye, but he knows she'd definitely stop him if she found out. Haruka manages to sneak out of the lodging successfully, but once he's outside, he makes the classic mistake of taking off his invisibility cloak, thinking he's in the clear. So as he tries to jump over the wall, a couple of the girls who are hanging around outside spot him. So Haruka gets panicky and loses his footing, and in a moment of pure bad luck, he slams his family future against the wall. He crashes to the ground, groaning, and yells at the girls for scaring him like that. They just look at him confused and say that they were only asking where he was going and why he was jumping the wall in the first place. Recognizing them as part of the athletic group, Haruka quickly notices one of them is missing. Using his perception skill, he locates her, and to his horror, sees that she's about to strip naked right in the middle of the street. So Haruka, along with the athletic girls, rush over to stop her, and thankfully they manage to intervene before she's fully undressed, But by then, Haruka's grand escape plans have been completely wrecked. The next day, all the girls are preparing to head out to complete a quest for the guild. Haruka, still determined to tag along, asks if they'll let him join, but class rep immediately shuts him down because she doesn't trust him anymore after his little stunt trying to ditch them the day before. She then assures him they'll be back soon, and Haruka nods, saying he'll wait. But the moment class rep and the others leave, Haruka's grin returns because he has no intention of sitting around. He's learned from yesterday's mess, so this time he keeps his cloak on until he's safely outside the city gates, and once he's in the clear, he takes it off. Now he's officially out of the city, with nothing standing between him and his cozy house in the forest. But as Haruka is running, he notices a bunch of destroyed buildings off in the distance. Normally this would scream side quest, but Haruka couldn't care less because he just wants to get back to his house, so he completely ignores it. He also spots a horde of goblins, and it's a perfect opportunity for some quick experience points if he kills them. But once again, he brushes it off because his priority is the forest, not leveling up right now. Then just when he thinks he's in the clear, he stumbles upon a carriage being attacked by bandits. It's hard to ignore, especially with the people inside crying out for help. Haruka debates for a second, but ultimately decides to keep moving because this isn't his problem. But of course, as soon as he tries to leave, the bandits target him, so Haruka gets annoyed and tries to reason with them, explaining that he doesn't want to get involved. The bandits, however, don't care and keep coming at him, leaving Haruka no choice but to act, so with a single fire spell, he absolutely roasts them. The staff he's holding is from one of the weird item combinations he got stuck with, but turns out it's way more powerful than he expected. As the bandits struggle back to their feet, Haruka's still trying to avoid unnecessary drama, warns them to leave him alone if they know what's good for them. The bandits, impressed by his magic, assume that's his only strength and decide to rush him in close combat. But it's a big mistake because Haruka takes them down effortlessly, knocking each one out with a single strike. The bandits are shocked because they can't believe they're getting wrecked by one kid, so they are desperate for answers and ask him what his job is. That question hits a nerve because Haruka's still unemployed and it stings. The then bandits check his status, trying to figure out what they're up against. But when they see he's only level 9, they get cocky again, convinced they can beat him if they use their weapon skills. Weapon skills only unlock at level 20, so Haruka doesn't have any, and from what he knows, weapon skills are really dangerous, so he starts to feel a little nervous. The then bandits start using their weapon skills, and while they're definitely dangerous, they keep shouting out their attacks before they strike. So Haruka is unimpressed and easily dodges every single one of their moves until they all collapse from exhaustion. But just when he thinks it's over, he notices a girl approaching him from behind, and he groans internally because this has unskippable side quest written all over it. The girl introduces herself as Marielle from a noble family, and she wants to thank Haruka for helping her. But then she hesitates, remembering that he did try to ignore her at first, so she's unsure if she should be grateful. Still, despite his reluctance, she appreciates that he eventually stepped in to help, and she has a favor to ask. Her father is the lord of a nearby city, and she's hoping Haruka will accompany her back, since she's worried about her safety. Haruka isn't interested at first, but the mention of reward piques his interest, so he reluctantly agrees to escort her. As they travel, Marielle makes small talk, asking where he was coming from when they met. This prompts Haruka to launch into a rant about the awful city he just left. He complains about how the guild didn't have enough money to pay him, refused to register him as an adventurer, and how the city wouldn't even let him leave without a permit. As Haruka vents, Marielle's eyes widen because she realizes he's talking about Onmyo, the very city her father runs. So she starts crying, devastated by how little Haruka thinks of her home. Haruka feels a pang of regret, realizing Marielle is the daughter of the Lord of Onmyo, meaning the carriage he's escorting is headed right back to the place he was so happy to leave. So now he deeply regrets agreeing to this little side quest. Meanwhile, back in the forest, tensions are running high as the gym bros square off against the delinquents because the gym bros aren't about to let the delinquents hurt any of the girls, while the delinquent leader has no qualms about killing them if necessary. But just as the leader raises his sword to strike, he's abruptly stabbed through the back. The jocks and the delinquents are both stunned by what they've just witnessed, but as the remaining delinquents attempt to avenge their fallen friend, the first one to step up also gets taken down with a quick stab. The last two then decide to attack together, hoping to even the odds, but the unknown attacker is just as quick to handle them. The jocks are now fully aware they're outclassed, so they try to run, but the assailant is faster, appearing in front of them with a menacingly slow advance. Meanwhile, Haruka has just been dragged back to town by Marielle, and let's just say, he's not thrilled. He didn't want to come, but Marielle started tearing up, so he went along just to keep the peace. When they reach the Lord's house, Marielle leaves him alone for a moment, and he glances around. Sure, it's a fancy place, but it has nothing to do with him, so he heads straight for the door to leave. But before he makes his exit, Mariel comes back upset he's trying to bail on her after she specifically asked him to wait while she changed. She then insists he wait a bit longer because she still has something special planned to thank him. Haruka doesn't really want to, but seeing how insistent she is, he gives in. At first, he was totally against staying, but when Mariel finally shows him the feast she prepared, his attitude takes a complete flip. This whole setup is her way of showing appreciation, but soon enough she's annoyed again because Haruka is absolutely ignoring her, too busy stuffing his face with food. As he digs in, Mariel tells one of her maids to bring out the rest of Haruka's reward. They bring him a pouch of money, and while he nods in acknowledgement, he barely seems excited. For a bonus, Mariel even noticed Haruka wasn't registered in the city, so she went ahead and bought a custom ID card made for him, giving him free reign to enter and leave as he pleases. It's a thoughtful gift, but Haruka, now totally lost in his dessert, is barely paying attention at this point. The next day, class rep and the rest of the girls immediately start grilling Haruka about what happened last night. Haruka tells them he was just summoned to the local lord's mansion, and while class rep can tell he's not lying, she's baffled why the lord would even want to see him in the first place. Haruka keeps his story vague, not wanting to reveal that he'd met Mariel during a botched escape attempt. Eventually, the girls drop it and decide to head out on a mission. But before they leave, class rep firmly reminds Haruka he's not allowed to leave town. This time, though, Haruka seems unusually agreeable, but that's only because he knows he'll have no trouble leaving once they're gone. With his custom ID, he's finally free to slip out of town without any hassle. But before he bails, he has a few things to take care of. He buys new gear, feasts on some good food, and leaves a note for class rep, hoping it'll keep her from blowing up when she realizes he's gone. In the note, he says he's heading back to the forest to check on the jocks. It's mostly just an excuse, but he is actually a bit worried about those muscleheads. After showing his ID, he's cleared to leave town, and this time he's determined not to get sidetracked by any annoying detours. Before long, he's back in the woods and he's relieved to see everything just as he left it. Eager to get home, he lets his guard down for a moment, and that's when an orc tries to sneak up and bash him over the head. Luckily, Haruka's stats are way too high for an attack like that to do anything, so he squats the orc down with a single hit from his staff. He's puzzled though, since orcs don't usually roam this part of the forest. Even stranger, he finds a fresh human blood trail nearby, and since he knows the nerds are too strong to lose to anything in these woods, he figures it must belong to one of the jocks. He begins tracking the blood trail and eventually finds the jocks bloody and beaten sprawled under a tree. At first he thinks they're dead, but as he gets closer he notices they're still breathing. So without any hesitation, he dumps every healing potion in his inventory over them until they finally regain consciousness. The jocks begin explaining what happened. And while Haruka had assumed they were ambushed by the delinquents, he's shocked to learn all the delinquents are actually dead. Haruka quickly asks if the nerds were attacked too, but the jocks have no idea. They don't think so, since the nerds left the forest ages ago. They can see Haruka's intent to hunt down whoever did this, so they warn him. Tanaka is insanely powerful now. They barely lasted seconds against him, and to make things worse, he took all their overpowered weapons, making him even deadlier. They suspect Tanaka has been planning this from the moment their class got transported here, and they're not sure he can be stopped. But they're pretty certain about one thing: his next target. Among all the remaining students, they think Tanaka's most likely going after class rep, since she has the hijack skill. Haruka realizes it's possible Tanaka would want her for her unique ability, but only class rep, the nerds, and he himself knew about it, so he can't help but wonder how Tanaka got his hands on that information. The jocks were able to piece it together because Tanaka kept pestering them for class rep's location. When they couldn't tell him what he wanted, he beat them within an inch of their lives. They didn't want to lead him to her, so instead they dragged themselves to Haruka's area, hoping he'd find them before they bled out. Now with Haruka's strength, they feel confident they can win if they all fight together. But Haruka isn't so sure he even wants to get wrapped up in a battle like this. He came here to avoid all side quests, yet if class rep is in danger, he's got no choice but to step up. Still, he makes it crystal clear to the jocks this is a fight he's handling alone. The jocks try to talk him out of it, pointing out how risky it is to go solo against someone as powerful as Tanaka. But when they see the steely look in Haruka's eyes, they realize there's no changing his mind, so they reluctantly agree to let him go alone. Haruka tells them to head into town and catch up with the other girls, and while they're at it, they really ought to apologize to class rep for ditching the group earlier. As the jocks walk away, Haruka considers that having them fight alongside him might have helped. But he knows the risk is too high. If Tanaka overpowers them, no one would be left to protect the girls. So the safest option is for him to tackle this alone, making sure he's fully prepared for the clash with Tanaka. Meanwhile, back at the village, class rep is beside herself with worry after realizing Haruka has left the city. The other girls reassure her, promising that he'll definitely return. Back in the forest, Haruka thinks through his game plan against Tanaka because the jocks warned him that Tanaka's weapon skills are unbelievably powerful. Even the no-name bandits had terrifying moves, but Haruka discovered one thing: once a weapon skill animation starts, it can't be stopped. If Tanaka attempts one, Haruka is determined to exploit that split-second opening. But to pull it off, he'll need a new skill, which means he'll have to level up. Just then, he notices a horde of goblins lured in by the jock's blood. They're high level, so he takes them down for experience, but it's still not enough to level up, so he frustratedly mutters that he needs something tougher for real progress. And almost as if summoned by his words, a Goblin King appears and Haruka steels himself for battle. The Goblin King is a beast, its attacks are incredibly fast, and one blow could be fatal. Haruka has to dodge at the last possible moment, and there's no way to counterattack without risking a hit. Forced to switch strategies, he uses his warp skill to blend several of his other skills into a new powerful one. And with this new skill, he blazes past the Goblin King and takes it out instantly. He's thrilled that his skill combo worked out so perfectly. But just as he's celebrating, he senses a terrifying presence behind him, so he instinctively braces himself knowing that another fight is just beginning. This monster is a Goblin Emperor and is already at level 50, while Haruka's still stuck at level 9, so Haruka realizes there's no way he can beat this beast in a straight fight. His only option is to try his combined skill again, so he activates it and charges straight at the Goblin Emperor. The second he's within range, Haruka strikes, but his special skills don't even scratch it. The Goblin Emperor rises as if nothing happened and launches a barrage of attacks at Haruka with mind-blowing speed. It's obvious this thing is using weapon skills because its hits are way too powerful for anything else. Haruka desperately searches for an opening in the Emperor's attack animations, waiting for his moment to counter. He then spots it and strikes the Goblin in the chest, sending it flying back. But just as he thinks he's made progress, the Goblin starts healing itself right on the spot. Haruka realizes that regular attacks won't cut it in this fight, so he'll need to come up with another combined skill. But before he can think, the Goblin Emperor strikes back with a vicious weapon skill, launching powerful slashes his way. Haruka barely manages to block, but the blow leaves him battered. At this rate, his chances of winning aren't looking good, but he knows he can't back down. Not if he wants to be strong enough to protect his friends. So he drags himself back up and charges at the Goblin Emperor in one last desperate attempt to end it, and by the time dawn breaks, Haruka is the last one standing. Thanks to his relentless effort, he's gained 2 levels. Now that he has reached level 11, Haruka heads back home to check his status window. Just as he'd hoped, his new level has unlocked several new skills, though he's unsure if they'll be enough to take Tanaka in a fight. But with his made-up skill, at least he can strike in a split second to exploit any weapon skill animation. And now all he can do is hope that things turn out in his favor. Later that evening outside Haruka's house, Tanaka shows up and Haruka has been expecting him. Haruka remembers how Tanaka played the victim when the jocks bullied him after they first arrived, but now he sees it was all an act for revenge. As Tanaka and Haruka face off, the girls return to Onmui after a long day of adventuring. On their way back, they notice a couple of guys slumped outside the walls. They quickly realize it's the jocks and are relieved to see them, until they notice they're in rough shape. Class rep recalls that Haruka had left a note saying he was going to check on the jocks, so she asks them if they know where he is, and they tell her that Haruka's currently fighting in the woods to protect them all. Back in the woods, Tanaka is disappointed to see Haruka's the only one here because he'd been hoping for class rep instead, and he even went through the trouble of stirring up the delinquents to split the class. Haruka realizes Tanaka's been orchestrating everything from the start, and now Tanaka's ready to kill anyone who gets in his way to get what he wants. Tanaka sneers at Haruka, not seeing him as much of a threat, and turns to leave intent on finding class rep and stealing her hijack skill. But Haruka, even if he doesn't particularly care for all his classmates, can't let this happen, so he raises his staff to Tanaka's neck, coldly declaring that he will not pass. Tanaka gets irritated that someone he considers a nobody like Haruka dares to stand in his way, but he's more than willing to kill him if that's what it takes to see his plans through. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.